The road to 50 million. Today, the name of this video is You. Everything about it is about you. It's for you. It is everything I say. I'm going to talk about other people, myself, and others that I know. And I want you to hear everything as if you were the subject, because my goal, my goal here is only to help you discover your gifts and to serve with them. I had an interesting, we started last night on LA Talk Radio, and it was pretty exciting. The first episode's up, latalkradio.com. I had a fabulous interview with a guy who has made fantastic changes in his life, and he talked about it, his journey from how he felt about himself and his own personal struggles, both in business and in life, moving to where he is today, where he's very, very successful, both from a relationship standpoint, a happiness standpoint, and a financial standpoint. And he talks about the things that had to change, the things he became aware of. And I want you to listen to that and then hear it about you. Because here's the truth. You create your life. One thought, one choice at a time. One of the things we talked about last night was the discovery that thoughts are nothing. They're just thoughts. They might come as the result of input from one of your senses, eyes, ears, smell or whatever. Or they might come from a memory, or they might come from what someone says, or, all those things trigger thoughts or feeling in the body. You are something different. You are a spirit. Some people put the heart chakra somewhere between the heart and the spine, as an energetic construct. We don't see it with our eyes, but it's measurable and we know it and we feel it. And so you are not those thoughts. You are not your feelings. Feelings are a neurochemical cocktail. And so it's easy to say all this sort of woo-woo stuff, but the question is, so what? So what? So here is so what? Because you are separate from all that stuff, you get to define what you are. And making that choice, defining what you are, may be the most liberating and powerful thing you do. If you have some struggles, let's say you get sick and you're left with a permanent cough or one of your lungs is ruined, you can decide, I'm a person with a ruined lung, or you can still say, I'm a person. I'm a powerful, capable person, and I'm going to add good to the world, even though my body has a ruined lung. And stark and sort of disturbing example of this is someone who's had a limb amputated. So someone has a leg amputated. They're not a different person unless they choose to be defined by that action or by that event. Even two legs amputated. You've seen people in, mobility devices that have both legs gone. Well, they're not a different person. Their attitudes might be changed, their feelings might be changed, but the essence of who they are. And, at some point, if we lose enough of the body, then it stops functioning and the spirit leaves. But there's no amount of body where the spirit is except somewhere here. Sometimes we think our consciousness is here, but our soul, we know that it's in here. So you are your soul. You are that infinite thing that is infinite and eternal element that's inside of you that is watching everything happen. You might be watching yourself get a bad grade or do a bad project. You might be watching someone be upset with you. You might be the watcher of anything. That is you. You are not the thoughts. You are not those feelings. They're just part of your experience. And I picked this funny background on purpose because it's sort of mystical. It's got a magician and a head and on stars and everything else. Because the concepts we're talking about might seem a little esoteric, but let's just bring it to ground. Because my commitment with Road to 50 Million is to help 50 million of you, 50 million of you, serve with your gifts. And one of the things we talked about on the LA Talk radio interview last night was the ways in which Sean serves with his gifts and the things he does and what he's been able to create: friendships, business partners, family, his daughters, his sons-in-law, his wife, his 26-year relationship. All those things are of his creation, and he has built those. And to the extent they involve other people, yeah, of course they involve other people. But you and I, we create our lives one choice at a time. So if you are not your thoughts and you are not the things that happen to you, whether they're good or bad, and you're not even the mistakes you make, they don't create you unless you let them. And learning that truth, learning to stop allowing or to no longer allow events to create me, was one of the most liberating and powerful things that's ever happened. So here's the invitation about you. Where in your life are you letting events or others' behavior or circumstances create you? Let me give you some examples. Fear about what people might think. Okay, I had a conversation with some clients both yesterday and today about something I'm calling withholding. Where are you withholding in your being? Like you think you should do something or you think you should say something, but you don't. And usually the reason is somebody won't like it, or I'm afraid to, or gee, I don't know what will happen. Well, if you have an intuition or an inspiration to do or say something, then it isn't should I do or say that? The answer is yes. If you're worried about how it lands, then the exploration is, how do I do this in a way that lands well? How do I do this in a way that lands as I intend it to? I'll give you some examples. I was a manager and a senior executive, C-level exec, and had lots and lots of people that reported to me. And one of the things I learned is that as soon as you attack someone or criticize them or make them feel frightened or anything else, they quit listening. So if you have something important to give someone, maybe it's feedback, maybe it's a correction, maybe it's a change in parameters on something they've been working on for a long time. The question isn't, how do you do? The question isn't, do you give them the info? The answer is, of course you do. And if you have a problem in your partnership or with one of your kids or with yourself or anywhere, you don't hide the information. You don't push it down. You don't pretend it away. You face it, and you face it head on. But the question is, how do you do that? Because if I do it or you do it in a way that is attacking or negative or complaining, people quit listening and nothing happens. So learning and making conscious choices about how we interact in our relationships, verbally, non-verbally, and every other way, that's what matters. How you do that. And the goal isn't, well, I got to tiptoe around. And no. The goal is to be effective. The goal is for your communication to work. So if you're trying to frighten the dog and you shout at the dog's going to be frightened and, run away or jump or get off the counter or do whatever they are. But what the dog learns is fear. If you, on the other hand, distract the dog and get them off the counter, they get off the counter, so the result is accomplished. And you might give them some lessons and some reward for being off the counter and all kinds of stuff about dog training. But my point is, the way that we do stuff is the substance of our lives. It defines who we are. So if I make a choice always to speak softly, then I'm never the person who yells. If I yell a lot, then I am being the person who yells. If I'm afraid a lot and I withhold my thoughts, my work, my actions, because I'm worried about what someone's going to think or what's going to happen, then I'm the person who's worried and withholds. An example of that for me that I've talked about before is music, singing. My solo singing, performing the songs that I have on all those albums. And I've put it several times, and I'll put it in again today, the Spotify playlist, and lots of them are instrumental, but there's a couple of albums that are all vocal, and they tell stories about the books, Tightrope of Depression and Down from the Gallows. So the question is, I was withholding. And the reason I was withholding is because I was worried somebody wouldn't like it, or I would be criticized, or it didn't sound good, or I sucked, or whatever the right words are. Now, again, remember, this is you hearing this about you. So where in your life are you withholding your gifts, your talents, your blessing, your opportunities? Where are you withholding those because you're afraid of something? And if And remember, the important thing is that you express what you have to express, especially if you feel intuition or inspiration to do so. And then our job, our opportunity is to figure out how to do it in such a way that we get the effect we need. So if I'm as a manager, I'm trying to get someone to change their behavior, if I start out with fear and intimidation in any way, then they quit listening, and there's an entire process to undo that before we get to any movement. If, on the other hand, I start out without the fear and intimidation, and we just get to a conversation where we can have it without that, then movement can happen right away because there's no fear blocking the communication path. So that's one thing, withholding. Where are you withholding your being? If you're going to make an income and impact, if that's your goal, I'm running a small group coaching class right now, and everyone there set an income goal. Well, that's great. If you're going to make income and impact, then everything about that success depends on who you are being. I am being the person who makes the phone calls, who schedules the workshops, who books the clients, who follows the opportunity. That's who I'm being. If I'm being the person who makes up excuses and worried I'll be rejected and fearful, then I won't. But I created that by who I was being. So one day I was in a shamanic breathwork session, and I know I won't take time to explain what that is, but it's a breathing exercise that goes on for quite a long time, an hour and a half, that puts you in a completely altered state of consciousness. So in that altered state of consciousness, I was having a conversation with a visionary goddess with a big headdress on, and it was pretty weird, but it was interesting. And she said one thing to me. She said, from the place of being, the doing becomes trivial. And the trivial didn't mean unimportant. It meant not hard. It meant automatic. So what that says is how you're being, who you're being, is the foundation. It is everything. And the activities needed to create the results you want, the doing part, they happen easily and as a matter of course when we are being the right person. Another easy to understand example will help. And I want you to hear this about you for your examples. When I was in my late 30s, so about 30 years ago, I was quite heavy and I was not healthy. So I was worried about, I had small kids at the time. I didn't want to be the dad who couldn't play with his kids because he was too heavy and was tired all the time and everything else. And so I decided that I was going to lose weight. Now, one way to lose weight is to look at your activities and, ban this and don't buy that and put locks on the fridge or signs or, try to have someone drag you to the gym every day or, whatever, the drill. Create a set of actions that will cause you to lose weight. Most of the time, in fact, I would guess in the high 99% of the time, those don't last very long and they fail. The reason is not complicated. The reason is because you're trying to get to a goal doing something that is contrary to who you're being. And what I mean by that is as long as I stay being the person who eats these bad food, who snacks as late at night, who doesn't exercise, if that's who I'm being in my mind, that's who I still view myself as, I believe it, that's who I'm being, then all this doing is a white knuckle fight to try to force me into some new state. If, on the other hand, I do the work to change who I'm being, I begin to value my body. I begin to see myself as fit and capable. And remember another time in my life, I happen to have one. Maybe people do and maybe they don't. But a time in my life when I was limber and fit and could do this and this and this, that was probably 15 years earlier when I was in my early 20s instead of my late 30s. So 15 years earlier, I was all that. And by connecting with that truth and saying there really isn't any reason. So I began in my mind being that other person. And the act of identifying with that someone who says no to garbage, who doesn't eat late at night, who exercises because it feels good afterwards, and all those things. It began up here, and when I became that person, the stuff to do was automatic. And so I found a martial arts place close by to enroll in, and I'd love martial arts, so I started doing that again for a couple of years, and then I lost a bunch of weight, and then I plateaued, so I had to add a second workout in the afternoon, morning and afternoon, in order to make it work. And eventually, the hard way, with no drugs and no special anything, but just changing who I was being, I lost 90 pounds. I actually needed 80, but I lost extra, and was in fabulous shape, got my heart stamina back and everything else. So it was something that I had toyed with and played with many other times, but I'd done it the wrong way by trying to force myself to do things without changing who I was being in my mindset. Now, that's a physical example. It's one that many people struggle with, and it's one that people are trying to address now with all kinds of apps. So there's apps and there's food programs, and I've seen a program Noom, I think, that talks about the back of your mind. That's what they're aiming at. What are you believing and thinking? When that changes, the external actions are simple. And so the today is about you. I want to help 50 million of you discover and serve with your gifts. The question is, who are you being? Are you being a vibrant, capable, organized person that deals with all the needs of life, job and kids if you have them, and relationships and setbacks and all that? You're dealing with that, but still you're the person who deals with all that resourcefully, capably, manages their time well, and moves forward so that you can do the things you say that you want to do? Or are you a person who's married to their excuses? I can't, I'll never have time, it won't work for me. That beingness will guarantee failure, 100%. If you become another person, mentally and spiritually first, then the creation in the physical world is actually quite simple. Not easy, but it's simple. So that is why in the work that I do, that's where we work. We work on who you are being, because from who I'm being and you're being, you create your life. So your invitation on the road to 50 million today is, are you one of the people that is serving with your divine gift? My goal, my commitment is to help 50 million of you to do that, to serve with your gifts, to love yourself enough to get good at what you do, to change who you're being, so who you are being is the person in the world that is serving with their gifts. I had a text exchange, actually audiogram exchange with someone that I met 10 years ago who'd written a book, and she was doing really, really well. And she talked about her financial situation, which had changed because the pandemic did some rough stuff to her business. But what was interesting? She was animated and excited in her voice because she was adding good to the world with her gifts, and she was being that person. And it was obvious. I could hear it. And the finances, yeah, there was some struggles and this and that, but they weren't defining her. So there was no negativity or poor me or any of that. It was simply, I am the person who gets to add good to the world with my gifts and talents. I get to do that, and I've never been happier. So I invite you to hear this entire thing, listen to it a couple times if you need to, about you. Who are you being? If you want help being somebody else so you can create income, impact, joy, prosperity, purpose, then reach out. Let's talk, because that's what I'm here to do. 50 million. I have many platforms, a podcast, LA Talk Radio, which started last night, and a television program to help people with their platforms and with their message. If you're interested, reach out. Let's talk. I'll see you tomorrow on the road to 50 million.